Let's look now at what it looks like in practice. Karen and Greg, over to you. Could you please model for us how this resource works?
Thanks, Nahida. Yeah, we wanted just in the next part of the webinar just to give you a little bit of a kind of a peek into the resource and get a bit of a feel for what some of the activities might look like. So you'll remember that Louise shared the professional learning cycle, the leadership learning cycle, which is the kind of provides the structure and the way into the resource and a way of connecting with the kind of the key concepts and key actions, key practices and behaviors associated with the development of self-regulated learning. And we've emphasized all the way through that leadership is really key here. So the first step in the professional learning cycle and the leadership learning cycle is this familiarized phase. And so if I'm in a school leadership role and I'm wanting to find my way into the resource, this is where I'm going to start. And the reason I'm going to start here is because I really need to get a sense of the substance of what we mean when we're talking about self-regulated learning before I move into the next steps of the process. Karen talked about starting with the end in mind, and so we really want. I really want, as a leader, before I get going with this at all, I want to have a kind of a sense of what this is going to look like if I'm successful in developing a culture and practice of self-regulated learning in my school. So actually, even before I get into this card, you'll see at the top of the card, what I might be doing is in fact working alongside and learning alongside teachers in my school. So I might in fact be looking at a professional learning card rather than a leadership learning familiarized card first, to get into some of the substance of what we mean by self-regulated learning. And we know actually that when leaders are happy to engage alongside teachers in their schools in professional learning, that can be really powerful. But once I've done that, because I'm in a leadership role, I am obviously interested in what student behaviors and actions will look like in relation to self-regulated learning. But I really want to get a sense of what teachers would be doing if they were exhibiting the behaviors of self-regulated learners. So you can see the first set of dialogue points actually doesn't engage with pupils. It starts with teachers, and I'm thinking, well, if I want students to be self-regulated learners, I need teachers to be exhibiting, modeling those behaviors and practices as well. So that first question I'm going to be discussing with my colleagues, for example, in a senior leadership team meeting or a middle leadership meeting. What are the qualities that actually we want to see if we're successful in promoting this culture and practice? And in fact, you'll see that one of the ways that as a leader, I'm going to kind of think my way into what this would look like for a teacher is I'm going to think about what would students be doing if they were developing themselves as self-regulated learners. And then, so how does that connect with what I would expect to see teachers to be doing? And then, of course, Louise talked about the kind of the system perspective. So you can see then that the second set of dialogue points actually are asking me to think as a school leader about the kind of the conditions. So how am I establishing the conditions in my school, in our school? How are we establishing the conditions so that self-regulated learning can thrive? So I'm actually having to think in discussion with my leadership peers. So we're working with this resource, and we've got this idea of promoting and developing self-regulated learning. But how does this fit with what we already say that we do in our school's vision? What about previous professional learning that teachers have been involved with in our school? How does it connect with those experiences? Some really important things as well. I need to think as a leader about the practicalities as well, time and space. How am I providing opportunities that are protected for teachers to think deeply about how they're developing self-regulated learning in themselves and their students. And then also just thinking in really in some detail about who are the people who are the teachers that we have in our school who might be the key people to get this started or to really engage. And of course, I'm also going to be thinking about with my leadership peers, if we're saying that we want teachers to model self-regulated learning for students, then what about us? What does that mean in terms of what we need to be doing as leaders? So hopefully this first step for leaders engaging with the resource helps me to think about, okay, we want this to be coherent, so we need to be thinking about the level of students, teachers, and our own work as leaders. And then after that, having had that discussion, I think that should set us up for the next step, which is to move from this familiarized phase, which is a lot of discussion, maybe some kind of intuitions, some hunches, into investigating what's the reality like now in our school. And actually, I think, Karen, you're going to do that not from the perspective of a leader, but from the perspective of some teachers.
Great, thanks, Greg. Yes, I'm going to briefly pick up on some of the familiarised ideas from the perspective of these teachers, but also move into some of the activities that they might do around investigate. And just to say really clearly that the purple cards are for all sorts of teams and groups of professionals in schools who may be involved in supporting students' learning, and you'll all be in different contexts. So it could be a team of people who work with pupils who have particular or individual needs. It could be, as we said, early years phase teachers. It could be a large team within a secondary school with subject specialists. So going back to what Andy said about in the beginning about the personalisation of the resource, these cards are to be used in the way that you feel is most appropriate. And although we recommend keeping to the cycle very much and moving through these phases from familiarise, investigate, and so on, some of the activities on the cards can be adapted and people can create new ones and use the cards in ways that they wish. These are suggestions really for stimulation. So just briefly, the familiarise card that Greg's just talked about in the leadership context can be used with groups, from pairs to larger groups. First of all, familiarising teachers, let's use the word teachers just for convenience here at this point, teachers and their teams with the concepts that James has introduced earlier. So we're thinking here that they might describe a teacher who's particularly effective at in these approaches to stimulating self-regulation, promoting self-regulated learning. And then compare that with some of the teacher actions that are on the teacher action cards to get the idea of, well, do our ideas of what this look like actually match what this piece of what the cards say, which is a research informed picture of what the kind of teaching strategies are that will promote self-regulated learning. And also, as we said in the leadership one, it might promote self-reflection amongst teachers, just to say, what is it that I'm doing that is best helping students become self-regulated learners, and how does that compare with the research? But when you get to the actual investigation phase, as we've said, with the teachers, they can think of ways in which they can find out more about this issue within themselves, but also within their teams. So it might involve some peer observation. It might involve some sharing and discussion of how others are developing strategies. So, for example, one of the activities that you won't be able to read because the lettering is so small there, but take some teacher action cards between you. Pick out cards that you feel are strengths of yours. So again, self-evaluation there. Then share examples of how you might bring these to life in practice. And once you've done these, choose cards which you think might be areas of development for you. So very simple, it's a reflection exercise, but often best done in professional learning conversations, as Louise has said. Dialogue points around why you've chosen the cards, what might you do to go about developing practice, And to what extent do you feel that you're a self-regulated learner yourself? So, and how you can model this to others. So I think that really does speak of the idea of let me interrogate my own practice, let me be open to development, which in itself is a form of really encourages agency and self-evaluation in that way, in a very open context. And then perhaps teachers may choose to take some of the key concept cards about metacognition, self-regulation, etc., and use these to identify issues that they'd like to explore further. And similarly with pupil action cards, what is pupils doing now? What could they be doing? How can we, is that the case? And they could move into a small piece of action research if they wanted to investigate that further, either within their own teams or within other year groups or phases. And just leaving it there really, and saying that obviously in the tryout phase, once they've investigated what the current situation is and firmed that out a bit and deepened their understanding of the whole field, they can then move into trying out different approaches and having others share that and trying new things that might help to develop students' learning further. So let's just pause there and think about then, back to Nahida, we're thinking of introducing some teachers now who actually might have tried these cards in practice, I think.